Perfect.
Okay.
All right, here we go. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. Today, I have an awesome guest, William Ramsey. Wrote books on some of the coolest topics there are, Aleister Crowley, West Memphis 3, and much more. So I'm so excited. I love people that write these. I mean, you work so hard to do all this stuff. Your knowledge is probably better than 95% of the people out there. So, Will, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for the invite. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So first, I mean, what got you into what? Because I know like the work from just doing a podcast takes so much reading and all that stuff. What got you into like writing these books?
Well, I think it really came back to nobody else was writing on that subject. So I think that I just was like, well, isn't anybody going to say how important this is? When I came to that realization, really.
Yeah. Right.
So I was always an independent reader. I kind of knew that and it's really bad even to this current day, but the corporate media is really doing a lousy job of really
Yeah.
looking into certain subjects. So
Yeah.
I think after the whole Bush administration, that's really when I wrote. I was a
Mhm.
9/11 researcher, really, and once I
Really?
started seeing, so once I started seeing that kind of some kind of weird correlations between all these numbers and stuff that's what led me to read really Crowley from my own perspective, like read the original source text, not the biographies, nothing that was
Okay.
too sympathetic, like because there's a lot of people who are into that kind of
Hmm.
worldview. So I definitely do not have that, but I really kind of
Right.
voraciously tracked down Crowley, and that led me to write my
Wow.
first book, Prophet of Evil. And then when I was writing my second book, Children of the Beast, that's when I kind of came across the West Memphis 3, and I kind of just took a 90-degree turn and
Yeah.
really followed the West Memphis 3 because it involved so many people that I had seen, Johnny Depp and
Mm.
Henry
I can't.
Rollins and
Right.
Peter Jackson. So all of these celebrities that I'd seen around, what are they doing hanging around this guy? And why is the court record so much different than the public record? And you'll see that in a lot of different cases, especially Epstein, who I've been following this Maxwell story. Like the in-court
Right.
documents aren't the same as the public or the people who are doing the research. So anyway, Crowley, West Memphis 3, Children of the Beast was really Crowley's influence on the 20th century. And then I've
So I
done
guess
five.
let's start.
Yeah,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry. We I was gonna say we could start right into Crowley, like his origin story, or whatever you feel that's important.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, he
Yeah.
was born in 1875 in kind of England. He was close to Stratford on Avon, where Shakespeare
Okay.
was born,
Huh.
supposedly. That's a whole nother story. But Crowley, he died. Crowley died in 19. I don't think that Shakespeare actually wrote all his plays. I think it was
I think
actually
that's
more of
fair. Yeah.
the Invisible College. But anyway, Francis Bacon. Anyway, so he was born. He died in 1947 in Hastings, in far southern England, and really he came from a wealthy brewing family. They were brewers, but they also
Huh.
kind of like provided bars with like snacks and sandwiches. So they made money in a
Huh.
lot of different ways. Yeah, but they were from kind of a very rigid Christian sect called they were actually part of Darby's group, the Plymouth Brethren. They were part a subset of that called
Hmm.
the Exclusive Brethren. So Crowley remembered his childhood as very kind of rigid and religious. His father died when he was 12, but Crowley was very smart. He was able to survive their kind of private schools. They call them public schools, but they were really private schools and state
Okay.
sensitive thing. So he survived like real brutal beatings and stuff like that, but
Hmm.
made it into Cambridge. And really, that's when he really developed three interests, which were poetry, mountain climbing, and occultism. And he never really had to work. So he really devoted himself kind of like as a member of the upper class of the
Huh.
UK to those three things. He said he was white hot on those subjects. So that led him really into the occult. He became kind of associated with a group called the Golden Dawn. He was a member. He hung out
Right.
with kind of famous people. So they learned kind of Western esotericism, which borrowed a lot from the East. And Crowley, as
Okay.
kind of a scholar of the occult, really took their ideas, made his own trips all around the world. He traveled to India twice to go mountain climbing and traveled through what would be Vietnam today and southern China. So he's always picking up all this information, yoga and
Hmm.
Hinduism and things like that. So he really created his own religion. I think that was really his goal. And he left, he told people, I'm going to create my own religion. I'm going to overthrow Christianity. And in
Hmm.
100 years, people will be in the sunset of Crowleyanity. So he really had that intent, and really his formative, or what he says, he claims is his most important moment was in 1904 when he was in Cairo, Egypt, with his wife Kelly,
Right.
and they had this whole. He supposedly received this book called the Book of the Law, and that became his
Right.
foundational text for his whole religion was the Book of the Law, and that was 1904. Died in 1947. So he's constantly writing and reading, and he wrote fictional literature,
Oh, I didn't know
text
that.
on magic. He wrote for the what's the magazine? Vanity Fair, which is still in existence. So you still see
Well,
people
yeah,
writing in
yeah.
Vanity Fair. So he wrote for them in the early
Huh.
19th, 20th century. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and under a variety of names, none of his scholars, there's a lot of other people who admire Crowley, but nobody's really made an effort to compile all of his different writings and journalism and things like that he did to try to get by or make extra money. It's really interesting, but a lot of different stuff. If you look at the corpus of his works, it's really voluminous. But that's what he
Wow.
dedicated himself to was, and he thought he was a master of the English language, and in a lot of ways he was, but not a
Well,
very nice person. Had a lot of terrible
yeah.
relationships,
You
and
said earlier that like people view him positively. I don't. I mean, I briefly read about him. Why do what do people say positive about Crowley?
well, I mean, I think from him, it's like the liberator of humanity.
Hmm.
His idea of freedom would be positive. His idea is that man is God, so you could be your kind of
Mm.
own independent person creating your own life. So you weren't
Right.
tied to Christianity or anything like that, and also kind of free love and drugs. So a lot of people were attracted to
Okay.
that ideas, and I think that his ideas were very important to people like Timothy Leary and really the 60s in
Right.
general. There was
Okay.
definitely a correlation between that kind of social upheaval and Crowley's ideas. If you read my
Right.
book, Children of the Beast, it's clear Leary thought that he was kind of carrying on the Crowleyan tradition and said as much.
Really.
Yeah. And there was some weird kind of correlations. He said that he called them synchronous elements because they were both in
Mm.
Algeria. And so
Wow.
Leary, yeah. So Leary had to flee the United States. He ended up in Tunisia. He traveled to Algeria, northern
After
Africa.
after his like acid and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I think it
Okay.
was like 68 or 69. He got
Huh. I didn't
tied.
know he had to
Yeah.
leave.
Yeah, no, he was actually broken out of jail. Leary was in
No
California.
way.
Yeah, so it was by members of the underground. What is it? I forgot that group, but they actually broke him out of jail and took him all the way to Algeria. There was a couple of
Wow.
African American kind of soul on ice. Eldridge Cleaver was there as well. So it was part of kind of the '60s upheaval. Leary was part of that.
Okay.
It was very strange because he's a lot like Crowley because he had definite intelligence connections. He
Yeah.
always praised the CIA, and Crowley himself was probably a lifelong, and he says as much that he was a member of the British intelligence, probably from right when he left
Why do you
Cambridge.
think that is? Like I keep get as more I get into like the occult, it has its ties in the intelligence community. Why is that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that there's a really good book about Crowley and his intel stuff called Secret Agent 666. I can't remember the
All right,
author's name, but there's a
I'll put that, I'll get
really good
that.
book, and
Yeah.
there's actually interviews by that author. He's been around, so he actually
Okay.
discovered some stuff that Crowley when he was in New York for World War One was definitely in the employ of British intelligence. They called it
Hmm.
something different. They changed it to MI5 and 6, but
Okay.
before that, it was known as the Secret Intelligence Service, the SIS.
Okay.
But I think that these people who are into I mean, we can talk about the U.S. stuff too, but the Bush family and their cult too.
Yeah.
But and then there's
Ah.
actual tie-ins. I mean, it gets kind of disturbing. But um, I
Wow.
think it's because they don't have the same kind of moral hesitation that
Hmm.
somebody from a different kind of worldview would have.
Hmm.
And the occult is all basically secret knowledge, and a lot of these, I
Right.
think, these secret intelligence guys are like that. They have secret knowledge, and they kind of keep it to themselves. They know stuff about
Hmm.
doing operations, and it's very strange because in the English language, a lot of the terminology in magic and in intelligence or intelligence groups is similar. There's actually weird overlaps because like the magicians will say I'm commencing an operation, and a lot of these intelligence
Wow.
guys say yeah, operation,
Yeah.
and the idea of the ghost or like a spectral thing. It's really weird. So um
Huh.
Yeah. So why I think that that's really it. That's why, and I think that that's the attraction to intelligence of people from that kind of background. So,
Hmm.
um,
Also, I'm like a 101 level of Crowleyan knowledge. I listen to Isaac Weishaupt a lot, so that. But um, so what I also found interesting was like Crowley and magic. What are those things? Was that like this was like a sigils and movements and phrases and stuff like that? Like where was this stuff? Like did he just make this up from the Book of the Law? Like how did he get this? It was very specific. I read like 2,000 years later they were still doing like the same, you know, routine or what a seance, whatever you want to
movements
call
or
it.
whatever, right?
Yeah,
Rituals.
yeah.
Well, I think that like if you look at like one of his other groups that he became part of and then ran was the Ordo Templi Orientis
Mm-hmm.
that made its claim, which you'd have to check out the true accurate historicity of whether they made this claim, but they claimed to go all the way back to the Middle East and Sumerian magical ideas, and so does actually the Masons as well. So you see some of that stuff. So you see like I think it was Jack de la Molay, Friday the 13th when he was
Yeah.
killed by.
Right.
So
Right.
these guys all kind of had that same kind of, whether it's true or not, their pretense that
Yeah.
they go all the way back to history. So I think their ideas go back to like Crowley translated Solomon's texts. So Solomon was
Okay.
David's son who became interested in magic. And so he's translating. So they're trying to bring all this stuff back from thousands and thousands of years, the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism.
Right.
So I think that that was integrated into the Golden Dawn magical system, and then Crowley integrated, and it just kind of expands. And I think even modern magicians are still, they may have variations, or occultists may have variations on these texts, but a lot of them do like the banishing rituals and all the vanishing rituals, the pentagram, and all that stuff is still
Right.
really there.
Okay.
So,
From your studies, like, have you? I mean, is this still going? Like, is this still going on today in the secret societies? Do you think, or is this something like a art that's lost, kind of?
oh, that's a good question. I think that you could probably analogize the occult to Christianity, where there's all kinds of different sects
Huh.
and impressions, but I think that generally almost all occultists are probably influenced by Crowley by one way or the other, whether they're true
Wow.
devotees. But I think that they all end up going back to reading it. I think that's the potency of Crowley, as opposed to maybe Masonic people or some of these other occultists that live, maybe Alice Bailey. But it seems like
Yeah.
Crowley was much more important to them. Now, who takes up what? Like my modern,
Right.
if you read kind of like LaVey or Michael Aquino trying to
Oh,
the
yeah.
Temple of Set, these guys all
Right.
reference Crowley. And even the
Hmm.
Order of Nine Angles, which I've been kind of researching recently,
I've
they all
never heard.
criticize or read Crowley and then go, I'm going to take this, or I agree with that, or I think he's
Wow.
pretentious. Yeah. So I think that it's still, I think it's current. I really do think, and if you look at like Damien Eccles of the West Memphis Three, he's Crowley. He said that he was persecuted for his love and knowledge of Aleister Crowley, and that guy, like I
So
said,
who was the West? Could you, because I've briefly heard that story kind of recently, but I never before that I never heard of the West Memphis Three. So what happened with that?
well, it's kind of like an old case, so it's not surprising. In 1993, it was May 5th, 1993. Three young 8-year-old boys were in West Memphis, which is across. It's west. I mean, it got its name because it's west of the Mississippi River, across the Mississippi
Okay.
from Memphis, Tennessee. So it's kind of
Okay.
like a lower middle class type of town where these three kids went missing. They found them. They were all hidden underwater in a ditch. And
Wow.
so it was, national news. And on June 3rd, 1995, almost a month later, three people were arrested: Jason Baldwin, Jesse Miskelly, and Damien Eccles. And they were tried and all convicted of the crime in 1994, two separate trials. So it was a
Okay.
total of 24 jurors. But really what happened is it became kind of like a well-known thing because of HBO had a documentary team there,
Mm,
Berlinger and Sanofsky, and their first movie was called Paradise Lost, which came out in
okay.
1996. But they kind of turned it into a trilogy, and I think that's really what changed public perception from that, is people got their information about the case from a Hollywood documentary, which is
Right.
never a good idea. It's
Yeah.
just like you should
Never
like,
works
whoa, don't
out.
go that dark. So they um, And I personally, like, I was like, oh, they're guilty. I didn't think about it. And then they got
Yeah.
out. There was a huge kind of public uh, outcry because they were supposedly
Okay.
railroaded. They were convicted. The cover story, or the public story, was that they were convicted due to their liking black clothing, and they really weren't the real criminals. Is the story? There's somebody
Okay.
else who did it. So they were raised $10 to $20 million. So a huge amount of money. They got the best lawyers they could
Wow.
get, appellate lawyers. A guy by
Okay.
the name of Dennis Reardon, who did Barry Bonds' case, if you remember that. I don't know,
Wow.
into sports. Yeah. So they get the same guy, and eventually they
Wow.
find their way out. They kind of just weasel. They actually pled guilty again, which is very strange in criminal law, that somebody gets convicted twice, but they pled guilty for first degree murder,
Yeah.
and with the best lawyers possible, in August of 2011. So they were let
Wow.
out of So they were let out of jail, and I think the public opinion is that they were unjustly, put through this punishment, 17 years in jail,
Okay.
by a bunch of hillbillies in Arkansas who
Right.
were KKK members and swilled
Right.
moonshine or something. The truth of the matter is that the original lower court decisions were affirmed on appeal by the Supreme Court of Arkansas. So a totally different,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they
It
actually
changes
tried to
that.
go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of the United States didn't want to hear the case. There's all kinds of problems and evidence in the once you start reading the case files, which are available on the Callahan 8K website, you see a whole different story side to the case, which is Damien Echols has a 500-page psych record
Wow.
yeah, and that was actually compiled by his defense team. So it wasn't compiled by the prosecution. It was compiled by the
Yeah.
defense team because they
That's
were,
odd.
yeah, it was on appeal. They were trying to appeal his capital murder sentence.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. That makes
so
sense
there's
then.
that, and also Jesse Miskelly confessed originally, and people have said, oh, it was a bogus confession. But after Jesse Miskelly was convicted, he started saying we did it again and again and again, and all of that is in an audio, so you can hear these audio tapes. So
Yeah.
they're conveniently ignored. Whenever you see convenient omissions of fact, you have to kind of sit
Right.
up straight. So
Yeah.
my first book, Abomination, was about that case, and I
Well,
really,
what made that case so different?
well, it's different in a lot of ways. So I think that involves a lot of very important themes to understand, which is
Okay.
PR, public relations, how
Uh,
things in court can be different than what they're saying in public. It's almost kind of like a mobocracy type thing where this outside
huh.
force raised tons of money and influenced in court dynamics.
Right.
It's also about Satanism. I mean, it's about occultism, because what does Damien Eccles do when he gets out? He starts writing books on magic. So he's written like 5 books.
Really?
Yeah, he's written 5 books on magic and angels and demons, and he does his own
Wow.
tarot readings. Yeah, he moved directly to Salem,
No.
Massachusetts.
Really?
Right, out of
Really?
no, yeah, but because he was sympathetic to the witch trials, so he drew a
Wow.
correlation. Right, so he drew a correlation between himself
Hmm.
and being like I mean, I guess this is the public thing, that he was supposedly
Yeah.
unjustly convicted with the witch trials, the Salem witch trials, the infamous Salem witch trials,
Yes.
the Crucible, which we can get into.
Right.
There's also some sketchy
Yeah.
stuff about that story, but it's interesting because I followed that, and anyway, there's just so much more
Well,
to the case
what
that the
was like,
public, yeah.
yeah, I'm sure there's what was like one of the key things that gave, like, was this like kind of during the satanic panic thing in America?
Well, that's what's brought up, and in there, that case is used as an example of satanic panic. So this is kind of a loaded term, but
Okay.
really, what piqued my interest in the case was I was looking at a video um, of Eccles, and they were asking him stuff about Crowley, and I had just finished a book on Crowley, right? So
Right.
I was like,
That
"What's
makes sense.
Crowley in this?" And stuff.
Yeah.
That set me off on, like, 1,000-mile adventure, because everybody said that they were innocent, and I'm literally scratching my head, like, how are they
Right.
innocent when they're guilty in court? How is this
Yeah.
working?
Right.
What's an offer
Right.
plea? What happened there? Why are these
Yeah.
documentaries always? So I had to ask a lot of questions to really kind of get through the propaganda or the public relations, which are very similar to each other.
Right.
But that's really what interested me in the case. And once I saw that I'm still convinced they were justly convicted, that they're the real perpetrators of the crime, and the people that they blamed, whether it was one of the stepfathers are transparently false. And then so you're going back like, well, if that's false, that's it. So there's a lot of real problems with the case. Then if you really research it, really my book in a lot of ways was just a core. I mean, nobody until I wrote my book in 2012 had taken the core documents and put a
Wow.
timeline together and said,
I will
this is
definitely have to
exactly
check
what
it out.
happened. And saying that Satanism was involved is not popular at all. They'll call you a witch
Really?
hunter. Yeah. Witch hunter, Christian
Did they did
fundamentalist.
they like were there found like satanic things around this case though? Like what, or is
Well,
that a loaded question as
no,
well?
it's not, because there's tons of it. So
Okay.
there's all kinds of drawings. There's like a drawing of child
Mm,
sacrifice. There's statements that this guy
wow.
licks blood.
Wow.
There were
Okay.
meetings at a place they called Stonehenge, which was an old cotton gin that had been abandoned. It's covered in pentagrams. They were doing fires. So
Wow.
yeah, no, there's tons of stuff. There's tons of
This,
books on occult that are involved. There's candle
mm,
wax at the scene. There's just all kinds of
okay.
creepy stuff. And yeah, so they ignored that, but there was stuff that came into the court case that involved that as well. And I mean, it just goes on.
Wow.
Tattoos. He had a downward facing pentagram tattoo on his chest,
Yeah.
like would be a jail tattoo, like somebody did it real
Right.
cheap. Um,
Okay.
and that was brought up in
Well,
court. So
this.
there's tons. And he had asked for an encyclopedia of witchcraft by a noted author
Wow.
whose name I can't remember right now. But
This kind of sounds like the Franklin count, like like what was I
yeah,
can't
Franklin
Matt.
cover up. Yeah, Franklin cover up.
Yeah, but I can't remember the kids, the Paul Benatti or Paul something like that. He
Paul Bonacci.
came
No,
out
you're
and
right.
said,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and he said like that there was lots of people, and this was around the same time, I would think. I think that was a little earlier than that, but
It was
men in
around the
hoods.
80s, I think, is Bonacci. That's Omaha, Nebraska. So it's not that far
Yes,
from West Memphis. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, but it sounds similar to that. So do
But
you think like? Oh, go ahead.
another theme that's just to interject a little bit, another
Yeah,
theme that's really
yeah,
is the
go for
power
it.
of celebrity, because the celebrities really were the ones who generated this thing that he was innocent. So all these people,
Ah,
Marilyn
okay.
Manson, Johnny Depp, Henry
Yeah.
Rollins, Margaret Cho, Dixie Chicks,
Wow.
the guy from Pearl Jam, Eddie Vedder. So all these
Wow.
people, yeah, they were just a huge group saying this is an injustice. So I think that changed a lot of people's mind without ever looking at the facts of the case.
Right. Well,
So I
that I
think
was
it.
gonna. That's
Sorry.
how they authority those lawyers. I'm guessing like it was for
Right.
support
So
like that.
right. Well, yeah. I mean, some these lawyers reared in. I mean, my understanding, I can't confirm this, is that Johnny Depp and Peter Jackson of like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings
Okay.
trilogy paid the lawyers out of pocket. Yeah,
Wow.
so they didn't even get it from the pool of money they raised. They literally were,
Wow.
yeah, big numbers, 50,000 a month, something like that.
And do you have a speculate? Do you want to speculate why they would do that?
Well, I don't need to speculate. I mean, if you look into Johnny Depp, man, it's not a pleasant
Yeah.
ride. Look into his
Right.
past, look into his movies, look into all
Yeah.
of his references. Why is he in all these sketchy movies? Sleepy
Mm.
Hollow,
Oh, that's a
yeah,
really good point.
From Hell, The Ninth Gate. Go look at all those movies. They're all occult themes.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it gets really deep. Really deep. And he
Wow.
was in that Grunwald or whatever. He plays that guy Grindelwald or
Yes.
whatever from Harry
Right.
Potter, like
Yeah.
the big
Yeah.
bad guy.
Yeah. He is.
And
That is
J.K.
the big.
Rowling,
Yeah.
yeah, J.K. Rowling insisted that he play that role. Why? So there's a lot of questions.
Really.
Yeah.
And even it was after he got that. I mean, I think it was wrong, but or alleged the beating case of his wife. I'm pretty sure, right?
Right.
And he still got that role.
Yeah.
So that's a really
So,
interesting
and I
point.
think he got fired from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes, I think you're
Got
right.
let go.
Yeah.
He was conveniently let go. It was a
Right.
firing, but they just put a nice little wrapper on it. But even that character I've heard is very much kind of plays kind of a chaos. Yeah, he has kind of like a little trickster chaos theme to him himself. So yeah,
Right.
yeah. So I mean,
What's your?
so Depp is. I think if you really, there were stories of Depp back in the '90s where he was getting all this magic stuff like bats wings from
No
South America.
way.
Yeah, they busted him like importing all these
Wow.
weird stuff, and he hangs out with Hunter S. Thompson, who's hyper sketchy and ties
Right.
into the Franklin cover-up.
Hunter S. Thompson does.
Yeah, he's mentioned in the book. I can't remember the Franklin cover-up by.
Yeah,
Can't remember.
I've read it, but I can't remember the guy's name who wrote it either.
There's a very little sequence in there where Bonacci says that he had some kind of run-in with Hunter S. Thompson, some sketchy run-in in
Wow.
Las Vegas, no less. And Hunter S. Thompson's base was in Colorado, so not too far out.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it gets deep.
Do you think, I mean, is this like the same I always like are try, I don't think anyone has the correct, like a perfect answer, but like the sacrifices of olden times, do you think that that's like what this theme that keeps coming up? Like clearly they're making contact with something because people wouldn't go through all this to just not be
Oh,
rewarded, right?
right, I think so. I think they're definitely doing what you would think that some old kind of necromancer or black magician would
Right.
do, all that stuff. And I do
Yeah.
think if you look, I think that that's one of the important aspects of the West Memphis Three is really about mind control and how, in a very broad sense,
Mm,
but how they're able to get this concept across to people without them really questioning anything. It's almost like they repeat these
wow.
they repeat these axioms about the West Memphis Three almost like a zombie. Like he was convicted for a crime he didn't commit. You'll hear these like same phrases played
Wow.
over and over.
Right. Right.
He was a part of Satanic Panic, so they bring up this loaded
Right.
term. But I mean, you can, yeah. I mean, people
That's
should be
why.
concerned. Yeah, these people's ideas are out there because they're
Right.
very dangerous ideas,
Right.
super
Do you
dangerous.
think that what do you think the purpose I think you're absolutely right with that mind there's mind control is so tied into like all
Well,
these
just to
people, but
interject too, Damien Eccles,
yeah,
nobody's read
please.
this book. Nobody's read this book, but he has made his own pamphlet called Mind Magic with a K. Like you
No
said,
way.
yeah, I was just reading your
Yeah.
Twitter tweet, but
Yeah. Yeah.
Magick, that book is out there. I've actually looked and said, somebody find that book and send it to me because I want to know what's in it. But he's written
Yeah.
his own book on mind magic. I don't know what he's doing, but he's not.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very strange because yeah, I mean, I think even on the stand, if you look at the stuff on the stand back in 1994, they
Hmm.
asked him, "Do you know anything about the cult?" And his response was, "I know everything about the cult." He did that
Wow.
when he was
That's
18. When he was
crazy.
18, right?
Wow.
Yeah, no.
Then the question is who's like teaching,
Well, it's a
who
great
puts
question
the
because
doctrine out?
in the court cases, they were friends with somebody they called Lucifer, which was a nickname of
No
some older
way.
person. So you had these young,
Wow.
disaffected trailer park kids
Right.
who really didn't care
Right.
about school.
Right.
They were just a different, not part of the people going somewhere. So I think that was really their kind of way to differentiate themselves. He called himself a
Mm.
goth, but it was much deeper than that. And
Right.
he's actually
Right.
made an admission in the back of his own movie, which was called West of Memphis. He admits to saying he wants to be the greatest magician that ever lived. That was really
Wow.
his, yeah, that's really was his thing. And it's been exposed like he does. You can go look this up. He used to call it Magic Revolution. I don't know what his YouTube channel is now, but
So he has that's crazy.
no, yeah, no. So he's actually just like a proselytizer. He's teaching people magic.
Wow.
Yeah, to this day, 2020. So he got out in 2011.
All right.
But it's interesting because he admitted to being in what's called the Astrum Argentum, which was something very specific to Aleister Crowley. It was his
Hmm.
own magical group, but it wasn't structured the way you would think, like 11 people get together and chat. It was
Okay.
meant to be a very rigorous training thing for the
Mm.
occult, where you only have one person who guides you, and it could be somebody
Wow.
from another place. Like you never meet that person. He has a magical name. He teaches you everything, and that's it. So Eccles is admitted to being that, but he's also admitted to
Wow.
confirmed to be part of the OTO, which I mentioned earlier. So the
Right.
Ordo
Right.
Templi Orientis,
Yeah.
and that was from the own literature from Arkansas. You can see all the stuff. All my videos are
Wow.
on William Ramsey Investigates. Oh yeah, it gets super deep. No, it's really disturbing.
That's
Yeah,
that's
so no, but it gets
wow.
even worse because he has tattoos and links to groups that I don't even think are publicly known. I do believe that there are groups that
Wow.
you can't even read about. Isn't that
Really?
crazy? Yes.
Like that high that secret or that
Yes.
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That
Wow.
whose literature and organization are totally like you have to be initiated to understand to see that. Yeah,
Wow.
I truly believe that. Yeah, I don't even. I'll tell you maybe offline.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
no,
just
it's
gonna
incredible.
say saying it would that like even searching that on Google you think pops up something?
No, I don't. No, no,
Oh, okay. All
no,
right.
no. It's super. It gets really intense. I'll tell you something offline, well, just through my
Sounds
research.
fair.
But
Yeah.
it's interesting because the study of the occultism of West Memphis Street Crowley actually ties into my Smiley Face Killers research because there's a
Perfect.
weird overlap. So all
Yeah,
my
perfect.
movies are available on Vimeo. You just have to
Okay.
type in William Ramsey. I think
I'm gonna
it's
have to watch these tonight. So
yeah. So
perfect.
well, my first video on the Smiley Face Killings was 3.5 hours. So people,
I'll start it.
it's a pretty grueling ride, but it was made in 2017,
Okay.
and that was so. If you dial it back, so there's this idea that there's this notion of the Smiley Face Killers that was around. It was really promoted by two guys, Gannon and Gilbertson. Gannon was a police detective in New York City. Gilbertson is a criminal a professor of criminology or something. I don't know his
Okay.
exact title. I think he's
All right.
out of Minnesota or Wisconsin.
All right.
They both notice this phenomenon of young men being found in water. So they meet up to, they don't meet up, but they
Huh.
connect with each other because Gannon has found his cases in New York City, Manhattan area. Gilbertson has found his cases up in the Minnesota, Wisconsin area. Young men disappeared.
Okay.
They started researching. What they found is that there's this symbol that's often close to where they think, not where the bodies are found, but where they think they're put in water. So this
Okay.
phenomenon got its name, the Smiley Face Killers, from that symbol.
Okay. Okay.
So
From the
then
water.
right, so water and stuff like that. So then they wrote a book, they studied it, they wrote a book called Case Studies in Forensic Drownings, a very kind of academic criminal forensics type book that detail at least 14 of those cases. So that's really the foundational work of that. It's been supposedly debunked. It's supposedly
As everything is.
right. So
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, you literally can just say I debunked it, and people will go, "Oh, okay, well it's
Yes.
debunked."
Yeah.
You say
You're
it's debunked,
absolutely
that's
right.
fine. It's kind of
You're
like
absolutely right.
Pizzagate. I think
Yeah.
Podesta actually used that term in Pizzagate.
Really?
Yeah, I literally said it's been debunked. I'm like, how can you debunk these
Yeah.
Instagram pictures?
Yeah.
Because
Right.
anyway. So anyway, I'd actually do a lot of stuff debunking the failed. I call it a section in my second movie called "Debunking the Failed Debunkers." So
Oh,
I actually analyze
awesome.
this. Oh yeah, no, they're it's terrible.
It's horrible. Yeah.
An atrocious, shameless amount of like lacking research.
Right.
That it's
Right.
almost like this is embarrassing. Like, oh, you want to take your name off that? Anyway, I know, the interesting thing is nobody ever calls me to debate me. They interview me, but they never want to have
Really?
an, yeah, I can't get anybody to do an antagonistic like debate on any of my subjects.
You
Like
probably know they can't.
they can't win. Well, because the facts belie that. Anyway,
Yeah.
Smiley Face Killer. So that was it. So I was studying. There's actually, if you can dig it up, it's on Coast to Coast. There was an interview
Okay.
by one of these guys. I think it's 4 hours where they talk about it.
All right.
There's a lot of different people coming from different angles researching it. I met up with a guy who I think is the most important researcher on it, Jim Smith online. Smiley
Okay.
Face Cult is what the title of his Twitter feed. I highly recommend people
All right. I'll take
follow
it up.
that.
Look at it.
Follow this because I mean the cases are like 100 or 200 worldwide. So
Wow.
yeah, no, it's really crazy. So
That. Yeah.
so I really tried to do the research. So in my first one is the Smiley Face Killers, who's abducting, torturing, killing all college-age men in the U.S. and U.K. That was like the 3-hour one. And I
Okay.
covered a lot of U.S. cases, but then the second one's the global slaughter continues because it's happening all over the world, especially Europe, U.K., tons of cases. Really crazy. And they have different terms for it. So in Manchester, they call it the pusher, this phenomenon, because they do find these bodies in canals. They have, yeah, it's really,
Wow.
yeah, no.
Is it
So
still going on now?
absolutely. So it died. It's weird because it really stopped during the whole pandemic, COVID from March.
Really?
And as it's opening up, it
Wow.
started up again. Yeah. So they
It's
had
so
like,
funny that you said the smiley. I remember as like a little kid when I hung out with my one friend, we were like so young, like probably 8. And I remember him saying like, I don't know, it must have been in the news then. I'm born in 1990. He said there's this group that goes around that kills you, and they're called the Smiley Face Killers. Is that something that's like, was this popular more like years ago or no?
it might have been. I think that the Gannon and Gilbertson got together in the 90s. I think the earliest case was is Kevin McNeil, sometime in the early
Okay.
90s. So it might have
Okay.
been around. The other people, there's tons of researchers, a lot of people the public will never know, but there's
Yeah.
guys like grinding spreadsheets and putting together dates,
Wow.
trying to
So there,
correlate it with moon cycles
so
and
the
stuff.
Wow. So what do
Yeah.
you think so it has water in most of these situations, and what other similar connecting?
Well, the symbols, and Gilberts and Gannon actually did, which I highly recommend. They did a 6-part series on oxygen, and you
Okay.
can see some of the. I think you can see some of that pieces of it, but they were also on Dr. Oz and Dr.
Mm,
Phil, talking
okay.
about their findings. But I think that I think it's a mix of things, but it's super dark. It really, and I think that,
Really?
yeah, and if yeah, you, I
Huh.
think it's also because young men don't consider themselves victims like women do, so they put themselves in difficult positions,
Mm,
situations or positions, and I think that you really got to watch out if you're at a bar because you could be targeted, and I think that's what the smiley face
wow.
killers are doing. Yeah,
Do you,
I
and
think
is
there's
it so it's predominantly men?
well this kind of phenomenon has been targeted men. It's weird because there's not that many women, although it does happen, but it's
Okay.
not that many women are found in water like the men have. Like there's really a
Huh.
serious like connection between all these people, and I just go through the cases, and I think that if you look through all those cases that are on my movie, it's like
Yeah.
irrefutable that something's happening. How you defined it and why, but
Huh. Wow.
yeah, and it
That's
ties.
really
Yeah, it gets
wild.
really deep. Yeah.
I'll have to dig deep and take. I've never
Well,
like heard.
well, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on my YouTube channel where William Ramsey investigates. I did a bunch of interviews where I just talked to a bunch of different people from different
Okay.
aspects of it, and you can see all those cases and stuff for free. The first thing I watched was the death of a young guy in Columbus, Ohio. His name was Joey LaBute, and I think
Okay.
that was in 2016. And I was like, oh man, if this guy gets found in water, he disappeared out of a bar. And I was like,
Wow.
yeah, if this guy gets found in water, I'm going to freak out. And sure enough, 19
Yeah.
days later, he materialized dead in water in the Scioto River outside of Columbus, Ohio.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it was really incredible. And young guy, vibrant, And one of the stories about these cases, and it's easily to debunk the people who think it's not happening, is that nobody sees these people go in the water. There's no splashing. Nobody
Mm,
says, I'm going to go for a swim.
mm.
I'll see you guys
Right. Right.
tomorrow. They just
Right.
disappear out of a bar and then materialize. And some of these other cases are incredible because yeah, it gets really bad. It's clear that these people are being held somewhere for a certain amount of time.
Wow.
That they don't die, but
Wow.
they disappear. Yeah,
This kind of sounds like the national park thing, like where
right.
people go missing, right? I mean, is there? Have you? I'm sure
Yeah.
you've done that.
So that
Like,
guy's name is 411, right? Missing
right?
411.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't remember his name,
Yeah. I forget
the
his
guy's
name
name,
as
but he
well.
did write a book on the phenomenon. It's kind of like
Yeah.
called Found in Water or something, which overlaps with the smiley face
Okay. It does.
phenomenon. His books, I think they're easy to criticize, and I've talked to that guy,
Mm.
Paulides.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. That's it. That's it.
And I asked him, I directly asked him, do you think these people are being abducted by Bigfoot? And he didn't even answer me. So he was just willing to kind of keep it a mysterious event. And
Okay.
after that, and I've talked to Jim Smith and
Yeah.
yeah. So my personal, yeah, I don't really have a high opinion of him, is my opinion.
Yeah. No,
So,
that's
yeah.
fair, man. You're
Well,
very
I
well
mean,
versed.
I read his stuff. So yeah, so there's definitely a lot of other people looking at. He's one of them, but
Hmm.
I think that if you really distill these cases down to like young men, there's just a lot of
Yeah.
really disturbing things that are happening. And
I mean, do you attribute it to paranormal things, or
no,
is it a group
no,
of?
it's a group
No.
of people.
Okay.
I think there might have paranormal interests, but I think
Okay.
it's a done by
Yeah.
human
Right.
causation,
Okay.
for sure.
Wow.
Well, there's a real kind of like weird thing within the occult about water and the
Mm.
spirit and things like that. So I think some of these guys really may have that idea that they're yeah they're doing bad things. I wouldn't attribute it all to all of these deaths to one thing, but clearly
Okay.
something like cells, like groups of people in different
Right.
locations
Right.
with the same ideas are operating.
Right. Well, clearly it's all over the world because you said they're in Europe and right. I
Right.
mean, this
And
group has to be.
but what's surprising too, I did a full segment on just the culture of the smiley face that a lot of people don't know, but it's in tons
Yeah.
of movies. It's placed in this
Really.
symbol, absolutely. So Fight Club, Watchmen, all these movies that you know very well, the smiley face is very involved. if you remember from Fight Club, when they blow up that building, they just put a huge smiley
Yeah.
face on the side of it. It's not there by mistake.
Wow.
Yeah, no, yeah, you got to watch the movie.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
That,
no.
yeah.
When
And
you
you're,
when you
wow.
see the breadth and depth of it, you'll freak out. And I actually think that Alan Moore, who's a known practicing magician, is putting
Uh,
these occult ideas um, into his work. So I think the Watchmen functions not just as a story, but there are kind of like
mm,
you would call it almost like a learning fable, symbols and fables in his
right.
work. And even Palniuk and Fight Club and all this stuff. If you read these books, no man,
Wow.
it's a mind blower. Yeah.
That is wild, but
Yeah, no, it
I'm
gets
gonna have
really
to
bad
watch
because the
it.
smiley face is everywhere. It's in like if you watch The Stand by Stephen King,
Okay.
it's just tons, and even clothing has the smiley face.
Right.
Yeah, oh yeah, and
So you think this is like a sigil or something, a
yes,
calling card
no
or something
question.
like that?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
No, it gets
Wow.
deep. Yeah, it gets deep. But the thing is that people, from a criminologist, I think this is my opinion, from a criminologist, they're thinking that nobody would have ideas different than their own.
Mm,
And I think the perpetrators of these crimes
right.
have an ideology that they cannot even comprehend.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they caught a guy. I mean, there's an incredible case. I used it it actually happened at the beginning of this year.
Huh.
It happened in Michigan, and it was a guy by the name of Katunsky who, and there's a correlation between this and like gay apps, it's in certain cases,
Okay.
like
Right.
Grindr and stuff like that.
Right.
But
Right.
he took some guy and was on Grindr. The guy didn't. You can remember his name because his name was Kevin Bacon, like the actor.
Wow. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
literally, the actor Kevin Bacon got involved in the case because of the.
What?
Yeah, no, it's totally crazy. So look up Katunsky, Katunski,
Okay.
outside of Michigan, and he had a freak. I mean, I don't even want. Yeah, he had a dungeon.
Oh, like horrible, gruesome
Yeah,
things.
like Saw level stuff.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
And this is just one person that he caught. And
Right.
he's like, yeah. So I did a study on gay serial killers. There was a couple really good books, which
Okay.
there's a guy, McDonough, who talked about, I can't forget, he had like 100 victims. It was
Wow.
incredible, yeah. And then there was another one, the serial killer was Eiler. Her name is Kolarek, and he was really smart. He was attracted to men, but he would
Right.
move between jurisdictions. And that book, I think it was called Free to Kill by Kolarek. It was the one book, they found that book in Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment when they arrested him.
Wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like, I mean, I know we're like speaking of, like, are these coincidences? Like, no. Okay. Like, that's how it can't be, like, at a certain point, right? I mean, it's like, it has to be, I don't know.
I mean, it's as simple. I mean, if you have that ideology or that world outlook, you're going to be attracted to things with that same outlook or that same event. So I think
Right.
that people who are interested in things, they're reaching out there in the dark web, they're communicating, they're using encrypted apps, they're using encrypted type things like Telegram, I think is one,
Yeah.
EGP
Telegram, yeah.
keys and things like that. It's not believable, but they're very secretive, and they caught a
So what
It's
came?
really a unique environment in this world because the internet makes communication of very subgroups of subgroups allowable. So if you
Right.
have a weird fetish
Right.
or
Yeah.
pedophile or
Yeah.
I mean it just gets, I mean, there's just horror shows of dark web things, things being filmed like in Philippines.
Right.
And they had this story in
Just
the
horrible
Ukraine
things.
where, a Yao of God was literally creating babies for sale. Like he was
Wow.
selling babies.
Right.
This was a guy who was with
Oprah, right?
Oprah, right?
Yeah.
Oprah was an advocate. It's unbelievable. People don't know how depraved that guy was.
Yeah.
There was something they found out where these Chinese, I mean, it gets sick. They were online. They were baby farming kids in Ukraine so they could rape them, so they could travel.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
How sick is that? It's sick.
It's great. Yeah. It's like
Bro,
this
and-
whole underworld.
Yeah, whole underworld. And I've had friends of mine who speculated that these smiley face killings may be somebody flying in from out of town or some other jurisdiction committing the crime and leaving.
Right.
So
right.
the case
right.
I told you about earlier about Joey LaBute, he disappeared. during the Arnold Schwarzenegger Classic, the biggest
You're right.
event in Columbus, Ohio.
Bodybuilding class. Yeah.
Bodybuilding class. All these
Yeah.
dudes are in town. They're
Yeah.
probably on roids.
Yeah.
The guy he was homosexual. He was in a gay bar.
Uh-huh.
You know, I don't
Wow.
want to speculate. That
Right.
guy, I'm 100% convinced was murdered. Like he did not
Wow.
walk to the CO2 and drown.
Right. Right.
So it gets really sketchy. A lot of these people, they have these, they're supposedly surveillance videos. They never work. It's just like, it strains credulity.
Wow.
Like, oh. So there's speculation about like the bartenders or the bouncers and So there's another one, Zach Marr out of Boston. You can just, these cases are just unbelievable. And it's strange too that they have never really put them together in one group. Like nobody else can see the correlation, but once you see the group together, you see the same MO. Disappeared out of a bar, missing for a long period of time, found in water, in pre-searched areas, like massive search parties, right? Not like John disappeared. It's like dad comes into town, gets 400 people to go and pamphlet and send out missing signs all over town. They never find him. And then all of a sudden, 3 weeks later, bam.
Wow.
So it's a real tragedy too, because I've had the misfortune of seeing the families who lost a loved one, and it's a horror show.
This way, especially. Yeah.
A mystery. Yeah. The cops are like twiddling their thumbs.
Right.
The cops are saying, "Oh yeah, he accidentally drowned." Well, how do you prove he's accidentally drowned? Well, we just found him in water, so he must have accidentally drowned.
Right.
Okay. Well, and they've actually had cases. There was a guy named Chris Jenkins out of Minnesota where they initially said he was accidentally drowned. The mom got involved, wrote a book. I think it's Footprints at the Water's Edge or something. Mm-hmm. They figured out something's going on. They found Chris Jenkins. He has a clump of hair in his hand. They don't know, like, it's even more suspicious. And he's dead. And then the police actually went back and said he died by either murder or misadventure. They changed the case after they went back and looked. Yeah, it gets really screwed up. So, like, Chris McNeil was the same thing. He was a Fordham student in New York City. He was at a bar in Manhattan. People saw him come out. He was puking. A car was following him. He's found in water. His parents get told he's accidentally drowned. Mm-hmm. Nothing happens. They just go, "We have had a tragic loss." The parents asked for his autopsy. So they get the autopsy. They found the guy's been hit in the head with like a pickaxe, and he was blowtorched on the upper part of his body. Like,
now that you say this, water, like in college.
Get this, bro. It gets even worse because there's probably tons of people out here who've come close to being abducted or murdered.
Right.
Don't even know what happened.
Right.
But they had actually Cyril Wecht, who's probably one of the most well-known authoritative forensic examiners with integrity, looked at the case and the autopsy file for the parents and said, "This guy was tortured. He's tortured. Come on, he's been burned with a blowtorch."
Wow.
So there's guys in there with very dark, very evil impulses and desires, and that's what I think some of these cases really are. Not all of them, but
you attribute it more to the occult side than like a sociopathic side, or is that one and the same? Are they connected?
It gets really deep. So you have to kind of watch the documentary, but the basis, if you look at the cover of my documentary, it's a guy, he's in like a GIMP mask with water being shoved in his mouth, and it comes from a video of 9 Inch Nails called Broken. Do you remember that, or are you familiar with that?
I know 9 Inch Nails, but
so they put out this video by this guy, and it's super dark, but I'm watching the video going, this is exactly like the MO of these types of murders. Somebody's driving around a car, finds a young man, gets tortured, and they put water down his throat to drown him. So he's not even in like a body of water.
Right.
He's in a freaking bathroom or something.
Right.
So then I figured out who's the guy who directed this video. His name is Peter Christopherson, and he's directed tons of other videos. He's directed other videos, 9 Inch Nails, but he was in a band that traveled around called, well, he was part of something called Psychic Youth, or Psychic TV, which is an occult-oriented group.
Okay.
But the band was called Throbbing Gristle. And I'm researching this guy. Lo and behold, he's like a Crowley lover. He's got there's videos of him in his house with actual artwork by Crowley.
Wow.
So not copies of artwork.
Right.
But the actual, like he went out, and they're scanning him and they're talking about Crowley. And I'm like, what is going on? What are these guys up
Right.
to? He's a member of the Illuminates of Thanateros. Thanateros is like
Uh,
sex and death, something
okay.
Leary was part of. It just gets so crazy and deep. But I
Yeah.
think that these guys are, so this overlapping thing of and he was a homosexual.
Okay.
So you see this occultism and that. So like I said, subset of subsets of
Yeah.
culture. I think that it's out there. And so,
Where
and
do
so
you?
I covered all these guys. There was this guy out of Manchester. His name was Sinaga, and he was doing the same thing, trolling for
Wow.
men late at night, drugging them, and they think he was the most successful rapist in British history.
Wow.
They don't know how many people he raped, but
Oh
that's
my
all they had
God.
on him. Like, what if he took one or two of those people and threw them in water?
Yeah.
But they
How
never
would you?
found out.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
I don't know. So, these guys are hanging on, and you would look at this guy, Sanaga, and you go, oh, he's just a mild-mannered student. He was a
Uh-huh.
student at one of these universities, and he went to church. He went to some like
Hmm.
John of Christodom church. So he had this kind of cover, but at night he was like a super predator. He'd invite
Hmm.
people back, drug them, and rape them. So I don't know how I got
That's
this. So going back to your
no.
point,
Yeah.
so the overlap between this phenomenon and occultism
Yeah.
can be
Yeah.
found, no doubt.
Okay. Where do you? So I tried to figure this out to myself. Like Southern California seems to be like a hotbed of this activity. Would you agree with that or no?
There's definitely cases here. There's been a few cases of mysterious. There's a guy named Van Zant out of Hermosa Beach. They never found his body, but he disappeared.
But
There's a lot of cases in California. There's some outside of LA, but there's cases in definitely tons that are hotspot in Portland,
that's
San
interesting.
Francisco, some in Vancouver,
Okay.
Seattle. But they're even in the Midwest. There's a lot in Indiana, definitely Chicago, New York City, college towns.
I just
There
didn't
was
know.
a,
Like, did this like? I mean, the occult kind of behavior in general. Like, did it start in East and then move like into Hollywood? Like, what came first? Like this Hollywood or like the occult aspect of Hollywood?
occult.
Does
I
that
think
make
the I
sense?
think the occult. Yeah.
Okay.
I
All right.
think I think that I think that for people who aren't into the occult, they'd be surprised how many people are into different variations of
Mm,
the occult.
it's
I
interesting.
would say even now, like in LA, the predominant religion is witchcraft for young girls. It's not
Really?
Christianity. Yeah. So
Really?
yeah, it's bad. So yeah, I think that the kind of ideas. I mean, something has happened also with the advent of the internet, where you didn't
Okay.
have those strictures of space and time, right? Where somebody had to travel somewhere or you had to
Right.
send a book. You can literally read all of Crowley's material online, pretty
Right.
much. But also other occult groups. I mean, we can get into the Order of Nine Angles, which really didn't exist until 1980 and really
Yeah, I've
was,
never heard that ever.
yeah, no. And now there's just murder. There was this guy in Toronto who killed and slit some dude's throat. And
Mhm.
he was doing Order of Nine Angles chants, which is something you probably only get that literature through the internet. There was another guy
Okay.
named Meltzer that they arrested earlier this year that was plotting to have an attack done against his own U.S. unit that was moving to Turkey.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's in the same jurisdiction as Maxwell, Epstein, Weinstein. So you can look up Ethan Meltzer. So these
Okay.
cases, these occult influence crimes, it's like one of the biggest jokes in the world is that the FBI tried to, it's called the Lanning Report,
Uh,
and they tried to poo-poo or downplay occult influences in crime, and it's just
right.
not true. I'm not saying all, maybe from a
Right.
religious perspective, if you're a Bible believing
Right.
Christian,
Yeah.
maybe all crime is really influenced by the occult
Yeah.
or
I could
occult,
see
and
that
not
connection.
literally, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
um, these guys are definitely doing it for occult reasons. This guy Von Newtigem, you got to look him up in Toronto. It's off the charts. My website is William Ramsey
Mhm.
Investigates, and I put up a lot of my old articles and some of the newer articles I'm writing about the Order of Nine Angles. It's bad, man. Yeah, yeah. It's
And
really super dangerous, really dangerous ideas.
what do you think? So what's like? I'm trying to think. Like, I want to ask. I guess who gets involved? Like, what do you think is happening with this spells? Like, what is the benefit that they get besides? Like when we pray. I mean, say what you will, but I don't have anyone speaking back to me, right? So if I was committing these heinous crimes for the same feeling that a prayer would give, you know what I mean? Like, what
Right.
are they getting out of this? Because they can't all be just I mean, I guess they could, but there has to be some reward that they're getting from this,
Right.
right?
So well, you look at Crowley's magic in theory and practice. If you're sacrifice, you're trying to get some reward.
Mm.
And Crowley goes into history of sacrifice and ends up at the ideal sacrifice as a young male child of perfect innocence, like an 8-year-old child. Right.
Wow.
So who dies in West Memphis 3? 8-year-old children.
Wow. I
So
didn't know that.
yeah, no, that's magic in theory and practice.
That's
so
crazy.
yeah, oh yeah. And I actually wrote a recent article, Crowley and Sacrifice, which you can read from my website,
Okay.
where I just show how much actual human sacrifices in Crowley's literature that people who aren't familiar with that don't know about. Because he mentions it in The World's Tragedy, Liber 66, which is one of his religious texts,
Okay.
which you're supposed to do a ritual. But I do believe they must think they're getting some type of benefit from Satan or demons. Like they literally worship demons and they want some type of benefit from them. And so that's why it's just, I think, if you look at some of these actions, like if you look at, what's the name of those? Son of Sam murders, where these people are shot. Right. These are kind of like sacrificial, where they're trying to obtain benefits and cause fear and cause destruction just for that reason, So it may not be like you're sacrificing somebody on a big wooden, thing.
Right.
I think they function as sacrifice. So I think that it depends what ideology they're really doing, but I think that they expect some type of evil benefit from evil forces is why they commit sacrifices. Yeah.
All right.
And it ties back even to ancient history where different cultures are killing people, whether it's the Aztecs, whether in the Old Testament they're talking about, what is it? What's the not Mammon? What's the name of the god? They're sacrificing their kids to Moloch, right? Or even if you look at Carthage, right? Carthage had this huge thing of like killing kids. So it's part of human culture, certain parts of human culture. And that's really why the Spanish really destroyed the Aztecs in total, is there was a lot of cultural elements. It wasn't pure greed, but they're like, you guys are killing people and ripping their hearts out in big temples of these dark demon gods.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Last, you mentioned Bush and the occult with the Bush family. Can you touch on that a little bit? Because I remember, but go ahead.
Well, it goes back to the beginning. It goes back to Prophet of Evil, right? So the events of September happened on September 11th, right? 9/11.
Right.
A date 11 years before that, George Bush Sr. made a very important New World Order speech on September 11th, 1990. So it just shows, it's an incredible correlation and real power. But he's using, so Crowley's really ideal number was the number 11. It's mentioned in the Book of the Law. It's mentioned in a lot of things. It's a number it's really the number of magic, but it's also, to Crowley, it was the number to the New World Order or to the new aeon. So he would use the term aeon, which is more of a cosmological change instead of, something. So like you literally go through another cycle of 2,000 years. So he's trying to bring this era of magic in.
Okay.
So 11 is very important to Crowley. Pops up all the time. So you got to keep it out there in that. So then what happens in Crowley, what happens in 9/11? If you look at it as a mega ritual or like black magic, Flight 11, 93, which is Crowley's number, 77, which is Crowley's number, 175, man. Right, yeah. So you can see, and even the buildings themselves are a big 11, right?
Right, a big 11,
So it's a bit, you can see that, but it's actually, and even Crowley talks about their numbers being an ideogram. So the 11 itself is even two things which are the opposites, right?
Right.
So in a lot of magical ideas, you're bringing, it's actually very similar to ideas from philosophy, which apparently were brought from magic, which is the whole idea of synthesizing thing, right?
Okay.
Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So the 11 itself and that magical thing and their ideas. I'm not a magician. I'm a Christian.
Right.
Jesus Christ is the Messiah. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't promote magic or
right.
I believe you should communicate with demons or Satan.
Right.
It's a really bad idea.
Yeah.
Because you lose your life and your soul.
Right. Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Anyway, ideogram, fusion together. So everything leading up to 9/11, that date, I think for occultists was very important because I think even George Bush was trying to create a new world order, a new aim.
Wow.
Right. So
Wow.
that's why, so you see that as like a point, and it actually kind of ties back to Kubrick and Arthur C.
Really?
Clarke. Yeah. Because they actually wrote 2001, they had this monolith in there that's 11 feet
Ah,
tall. The monolith is 11
wow.
feet tall. Right. So you got to watch, you should watch Prophet of Evil, the documentary, because
All
it has
right,
a
I'll
lot of
check that
visuals.
out.
No, so these, yeah, thank God George Bush Sr.'s dead, but he was, I mean, George Bush Jr. said, "My dad is a god," which ties into the whole
Wow.
Crowley idea of man being God. So anyway, getting to
Huh.
Crowley and the Bush family.
Yeah.
Crowley gets kicked out of Italy in 1923 or four, but literally by
Right.
Mussolini, right?
Yes. By Mussolini.
Literally,
Yes.
yeah. So he
Yes.
gets kicked out. He goes back to France. He's constantly in France. France is the cultural hub of the really kind of the Western world at that time.
Right.
Interwar, they call it the Golden Age or the Gilded Age or something like that.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Right.
Hemingway and all of
Right.
these wealthy people,
Picasso. All those
right?
people were there. Yeah.
Everybody from the elites from the U.S. are all sending their kids or they themselves to go be in that culture, right?
Right.
Art, literature, just
Yes.
everything was really before
Yeah.
pre-war. And so Crowley's there. So we know that Barbara Bush's mom was there. And she was
Right.
friends with friends that Crowley knew. So one of Crowley's friends was a guy by the name of Harris, who was, I think, for a time, the editor of Vanity Fair. So he had known Frank
Wow.
Harris. His name is Frank Harris.
Look at that.
Yeah, no, it really gets deep. So Harris is also kind of like a libertine, and I think they would call him a free thinker right now, which means not a moral type of person.
Right.
So he and Crowley's
Okay.
together. So her name is I can't remember her maiden name. It will come to me. It's
Pierce?
yeah. So her first name Pierce, right? But so she's supposedly there. Crowley's doing something called ECL, which requires these servitors to base. I mean, it gets really graphic. You're trying. Anyway, you need to. It's 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 called eratocomatose lucidity, is what
Okay.
Crowley called it. So you basically have a lot of sex. So she's
Okay.
supposedly involved in that through Harris's girlfriend, whose name is O'Hara. So Harris
Okay.
O'Hara and she's friends. So
I see.
it's interesting because even when Crowley is in New York City, he's hanging out and associating with the elite who are interested in the occult at that time.
Wow.
So you can see this correlation.
Right.
So he's doing something called the Gerensis working and all this other stuff that's happening in New York City in Manhattan. So it's literally kind of weird because very close to where the Twin Towers are. Anyway.
Wow.
Right. No, but the timing of Barbara Bush and her mom being in France and Crowley. And if you look at Crowley's lifestyle, he literally didn't mind having children. So at the end of his life, he actually sired a kid called Ataturk. Some woman came to him and he's like, he died when he was, I think, 72.
Yeah.
He was like 69. So he had a kid when he was 69. He just didn't care. So the timing is right. And if you look at Barbara Bush, she looks like Crowley. Crowley was he's actually Irish. So he kind of had this kind of blocky big head, which he tried to disguise by wearing a lot of scarves and stuff like that. But he had a big head. And if you look at Barbara Bush and put them next to each other.
Yeah.
So I'm not going as far as saying that that's his daughter. But if you look at George Bush Jr., and you look at the elite, they're very Brahmin, upper class. The Bushes are they come from a super wealthy family, Yaleys.
Yes.
And they play like they're from Texas and cutting shrubs and that whole fake. George Bush Jr. has a fake Southern accent. It's not real.
Right.
It's totally fake.
Yeah. No, they moved there later in life.
Right. So, yeah, they didn't. I don't even think George Bush Jr. was born in Texas. I have to go back and look.
No, I think Connecticut.
Yeah, I think
I'm pretty sure.
So,
yeah.
And you just see the dad. They're all, that whole family is either Bohemian Grove, Skull and Bones.
Right.
They're not
all
churchgoers. They're not going to. And I know there's
fund Planned Parenthood, the older one.
You couldn't think everything that they just support anything that's evil and making money. So all kinds of So anyway, so that's the correlation between that family and what happened.
Okay.
And actually really believe, a lot of people don't know this, but the Bushes are actually a front for David Rockefeller. And so was
What?
Cheney.
Oh
Yeah,
my God.
absolutely.
I need to hear this.
Okay, well, have you ever seen the conversation between David Rockefeller and Dick Cheney?
I don't believe so,
No, it's
no.
amazing. They're log rolling. Dick Cheney is giving us, who went to Yale, ended up at Yale.
Right.
Dick Cheney is giving a speech, and David Rockefeller pops up and starts asking him questions. And see, it gets really good. Council on Foreign Relations is a David
Right.
Rockefeller front, so it
Right.
was all
Yes.
his way to directly influence politics. Fabian
Right.
socialism, this kind of Fabianism,
Right.
incremental
Yes.
change. It gets really deep.
Yes. Yeah.
And Chase Bank is actually the Rockefeller family bank.
Right.
So when
Right.
you had the huge bank shakeup in
Yes.
2008, guess who comes out on top? Chase
Wow.
Bank. Yeah, go look. It didn't happen by mistake. Didn't happen
Right.
by mistake. So, I mean, that's the whole thing. It's almost kind of like some of these funds, the TARP funds and stuff went to select groups. So Goldman Sachs survived, Bear
Hmm.
Stearns didn't. People who got the
Right.
money, it was like a huge financial war. And I think the public was
Wow.
so shell-shocked at them losing their house by the downfall, they just didn't see the larger
Right.
stratagems that were going along. The Bush, no, but I don't think, I would say a very small proportion of society understands what happened, the true nature of what really happened during the Bush administration from
Right.
2001 to 2008. It was all
Right.
intentional. They intentionally collapsed the economy in 2008. They knew that it was going
Wow.
to happen. The deregulation was going to add, and it was perfectly played because it was played right as George Bush
Right. It
left
was leaving.
office. Yeah, it
Yes.
wasn't a mistake. And so
Right.
they left Obama just a big pile of horse manure, and they had to figure it out. They were panicked.
Wow.
Yeah, so oh no. Anyway,
Man.
so if you want to talk about Crowley and Bush, secret libraries, all kinds of weird stuff, weird correlations and friends, dates are
No, that's
strange,
awesome.
and you can look up a lot of the secret. Excuse me, like
Yeah.
a lot of these bombings that happen, these fake terror events happen
Yeah.
on numerically important dates.
Wow.
So you see
Wow.
8/8, 7/7, the London bombing. What happened?
Wow.
77. Yeah, no, it's
Wild.
incredible. No, yeah, no, it gets really bad. There were dates in these strange bombings that happened in Bali. So it
Okay.
was, yeah. Oh no.
Last question here. What's going to happen next? You're so well versed. Like, I tried to look at your Twitter if you're like, I don't know if you're like a Trump supporter or what, but what do you
Well,
think?
I would say Trump is the right choice. I think. I don't think
Okay,
they're
yeah.
great choices. Don't get
Yeah.
me wrong.
Right.
But Biden is a 47-year-old, super corrupt. He's actually making decisions that screw over all Americans. It's incredible that anybody would
Right.
support him. He's taking
Right.
bribes to take all of your industrial capacity and send it to China. He's
Right.
obviously
Right.
doing things that are treasonous.
Right.
So, and
Do you?
the fact that even the left would defend him is indefensible.
No.
It's incredible that
Absolutely.
anybody
It's
would.
crazy.
And Trump is no saint, don't get me wrong. But at least he's trying to put, people back to work and create
Right.
an economy. I think the Bidens are just in it for themselves, and their son is a total freak. I mean, he's literally
Yeah.
had meth teeth. Like, he literally
Right.
did so much meth
Right.
that his teeth rotted out and he had to have fake
Right.
covers.
Do you
Like, he's
see
not a crackhead.
us?
He's worse than a crackhead.
Right.
He's a meth head.
Right.
Sorry.
Do you see us getting out of, like, do you see, because I hear, like, people are always like, trust the plan and all those things. Do you see the world changing to become a better place, or are it's got to get worse before it gets better?
Well, that's a tough question. I think that a lot. I actually think Q is a really skilled, like, psyop. I don't think that there's any merit to even following anything with that. So trust the plan.
Right.
It hasn't really come true.
No, I
They
don't think
weird
it
things
has.
in there, and it's kind of fake Christianity too.
Yes.
So I do
agree
think
with
that you can elicit or make change through knowledge. So I think if people understand really what's going on behind the curtain, I do believe we're all living in the Wizard of Oz, and we really don't know totally what has happened. I mean, just like I said about the
Right.
Bush, they don't really know the totality. It was all hidden. All the
Right.
paperwork was burned. We don't see what's happening in Iraq. We're kept in a kind of a nice bubble. But I think that people, and you can see this in big tech, they don't want you to know anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely right.
I think that being nimble and moving away from certain things is good, but being informed. And I think that if Biden wins, it'll be a disaster for the country. I think if Trump wins, it's still going to be destabilization and riots. I I just don't. I don't have really a great prognosis for the future, to be honest with you, considering
Okay.
everything. And I think that you just had this kind of breakdown, like something has happened with Americans where they've, and I think it's because of the political parties where they're just kind of like lost their mooring
Yeah.
from principles, like
Yeah.
the principles of. And I think that that's a tremendous
I think it's
loss when
fair.
we're just thinking of each other from
As
Democrat or
enemies.
Republican. So I
Yeah.
got rid of my party affiliation. I actually had
No,
the
that's
stupid idea that Republicans were the best people for the Constitution. I would call myself an original capital L liberal, but I don't think you
yeah.
can call the left liberal accurately.
No.
They might have
No.
been, but they're actually
Yeah.
super right now. Parties change, people change, everything's in flux.
Yeah.
I would say right now, the left is the most illiberal group out there.
Yeah.
They're
Right.
they're super thin-skinned. They're
Yeah.
pernicious. They will persecute
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah.
They're the ones doing the
Absolutely.
violence. I think the right is actually dangerous, but the left is much more dangerous right now with
Yeah.
Antifa and the breakdown of basic law and order. And I think
Yeah.
that's really the
Yeah.
problem. So if you ask me
No,
where things are going, they're not good. But I think that I don't think a socialism or creeping socialism or communism is good.
Yeah.
I'm not a capitalist either. I would say I'm a free market, laissez-faire person,
Yeah.
which means that I mean, you should go back to the gold standard. And just
Right. Absolutely, they should.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They never should have left that.
Yeah.
That's actually funny because Nixon is kind of like a Prescott Bush front man too.
Right. Oh wow.
Yeah,
Man,
if you ever, there's a really good picture. If you look at the Family of Secrets, I can't remember the author right now, but there's a really good
I'll have
picture
to
of
look
there.
at it.
Prescott Bush is a big, tall guy, like 6'4".
Yes.
And
Yes.
he's literally
he is
putting
huge.
his hand on Nixon's hat like a little lapdog. It's incredible.
Wow.
He's just invading his body space, and Nixon is smiling at him.
Oh
And
wow.
Prescott Bush is incredible, man.
He's evil too. But so where can everyone find you? Well, I love it. I could keep talking to you forever, but how can they support you and where can they find you? All that stuff.
Well, the best thing is to look at my documentaries they're on Vimeo now. They may not be in the future, but there's 5 videos.
No, I'm going to check those out.
I did Occult Hollywood, Prophet of Evil, Children of the Beast, Smiley Face Killers 1 and 2. And I have 3 books on Amazon, which you can read if you're a reader. And my website is William Ramsey Investigates. You can see what I've been writing and kind of researching recently. So
awesome. No, I will I'll put all the links in the show, and you have I really appreciate you. I would love to have you on again.
anytime, man. Let me know.
All right, dude. I'll talk to you later. All right.
All right. Take care.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
William. Bye-bye.
You too.